Good morning, ma'am. Good morning, classmate. Our topic for today is about the reform movement, or also known as the propaganda. So, when you say reform movement, it was when a group of Filipinos decided to use their minds, their gifts, with art of their words, their gifts of speaking, to try to make Spain realize that this is not a very good arrangement. So next is the unjust execution of the three Filipino priests, Mariano Gomez, Jose Burgos, and Jacinto Zamora, or also known as Gumburza, was a turning point in Philippine history, for it ushered in a new era. The reform movement was a failure in that it did not achieve its goal. In other sense, however, it was a success, for its failure led to the founding of the revolutionary Katipunan. So, concept of nationhood. First is the role of middle class. Composed of Spanish and Chinese mestizos and natives rose to a position of power and eventually became leaders in finance and education. The middle class began the movement for reforms in their attempt to win a place in the sun and to end the abuses and arrogance of colonial officials. They were looked upon with suspicion by the masses due to the perceived arrogance and insulation of the latter. Next is the nature of the reform movement. This propaganda aims to expose the evils of Spanish colonialism, particularly the abuses of the friars and the Guardia Civil in Madrid, Spain. The principal propaganda effort was exerted in Spain, hoping for the Madrid government to be aware of what really happening in the Philippines so that some reform might be granted. The last is the Great Reformist. Three groups formed the nucleus of the movement for reforms. The first was the group of suspected filibusteros, including Criollos or Insulares and Spanish mestizos in the wake of the Cavite Mutiny in 1872. So, second group was composed of young men sent to Spain for their studies like Jose Rizal. And third consisted of refugees who left the Philippines to escape persecution. The most prominent among this group were Graciano Lopez Jaena and Marcelo H. del Pilar. Three great reformists, or also known as the Ilustrados. These are the men who are using their intellect, using their art and talent in order to reform the relationship between the Spaniards and the Filipinos. So, aims of the La Solidaridad is to fight reaction, the removal of the priors and the secularization of the parishes, the active participation of the affairs of the government, freedom of the speech, the press, and of assembly, a wider social and political freedom, equality before the law, and last is assimilation and representation in the Spanish Cortes. Next is the failure of the movement. Spain was too preoccupied with its own internal problem. Priors were too powerful. Reformists did not have sufficient means and support from the public. Lack of funds, which is even jeopardized the publication of La Solidaridad, and last is propagandists were divided. The significance of the movement. Because of the writings of the propagandists or reformists, a feeling of empathy grew among the people and heightened the fervor of the masses. Number of copies of Rizal's novels reached the local Ilustrados, who later came to lead the revolutionary forces in their own provinces. Attempts of the colonial government to stop the distribution of propaganda materials highlighted the very lack of freedom that the propagandists or reformists were condemning. The circulation of propaganda materials written in Spanish was seriously hampered because of government censorship, but the effect on the revolution cannot be discounted, since its failure led to the founding of the revolutionary Katipunan with separatist aims. In a way, the reform movement was a success.
What's up guys, my name is Ronnel Lungay. I am the reporter of Chapter 6 Module 2, The Factors Leading of Philippine Revolution of 1896. Module 2, Factors Leading to the Philippine Revolution of 1896. The failure of the reform movement was already evident as early as 1892, when Rizal was arrested and then banished to Dapitan. The reform movement continued for 4 more years until 1896, when the masses led by Andres Bonifacio were forced to take to the field against the Spaniards. The Katipunan was founded on a radical platform, namely to secure the independence and freedom of the Philippines by force of arms. The propaganda movement was a peaceful organization aimed to seek reforms from the official in Spain, but the Spanish government didn't hear the clamor of the reformists because the monarchy was saddled with many internal and external problems. So, as you know, the propaganda failed. Okay, we have the failure of the propaganda pushed the Katipuneros to start a more violent. This organization did not want violence, but the Katipuneros did want it. They said na, you know what they tried peaceful means. They tried and speaking, but obviously did not work. It ended up in the death of three greatest propagandists, which is in Del Pilar, Rizal, and Jaina. So now I think it's time for us to be a little more violent, which is never really answer, but you know, I'm just telling a story here. Okay, so you know, people did not come from very rich families, so these were usually farmers. Not that they were unwise, although sometimes they were also unwise, but these were not like the illustrados who traveled to Europe and all of that. These were composed more of the lower class of the Philippines. So now, if the propaganda promoted reforms, promoted equality, the Katipunan promoted separation. So, you know, the propaganda was kind of trying to fix the relationship between the Filipinas and Spain, but the Katipuneros were trying to break up the relationship. So, maghiwalay na talaga, parang kayo, di joke lang. We really want to break up with Spain already, and the means through which they wanted to Spain was through violence, okay? They wanted to do this through force and violence. La Liga Filipina. This was organized by Jose Rizal upon his return to the Philippines in July 1892. The primary aim of Liga was to unite the whole archipelago into one compact, vigorous, and homogeneous body. The Spanish authorities considered the Liga as dangerous, and on July 6, 1892, Rizal was arrested and deported to the Dapitan. So, La Liga Filipina was a secret organization. It was founded by Jose Rizal in the house of Dorotio Ongjongko at Elias Street, Tondo, Manila on July 3, 1892. The organization derived from La Solidaridad and the propaganda movement. So, let me ask questions. So, what is the purpose of La Liga Filipina?
So the purpose of La Liga was to build a new group that sought to involve the people directly in the reform movement.
Okay, thank you. So, in a few days, Dr. Jose Rizal was arrested on July 6, 1892 at itinapon siya dun sa Dapitan noong July 7, 1892. So, pansamantala itong natigil ng hulihin si Dr. Jose Rizal. So, the Liga membership split into two groups. When it is about to be revealed, the conservatives formed the Cuerpo de Compromisarios, which pledged to continue supporting the Solidaridad, while the radicals led by Bonifacio devoted themselves to a new secret society, the Katipunan. Immediate causes. So, dito magbigay lang ako ng isang under ng immediate causes, which is the KKK or Katipunan. You know, Katipunan is the secret organization that initiated the revolt. So, as you know, Andres Bonifacio was the supreme of the Katipunan, or as it also known, the kataas-taasan, kagalang-galangan na katipunan ng mga anak ng bayan. So that is really mouthful. I hope you will to memorize that because that is one of the organization that really reshape our history. Okay, so after Rizal arrest and deportation to Dapitan, La Liga dissolved. This was later replaced by a call aggressive reforms, put forward and favored by Bonifacio. Upon hearing of Rizal's arrest, Bonifacio and his fellows founded the Katipunan. So the anti-colonial secret organization eventually attracted people from lower and middle class across the country in joining them in an armed revolt against Spain. So here are the under leadership of Andres Bonifacio is the political objective was to work for the separation of the Philippines from Spain. Pangalawa, the moral objective was to teach good manners, hygiene, good moral, and to attack obscurantism, weakness of characters. And the last one is the civic aim was to develop self-sufficiency and concern for the defense of the poor and the oppressed.
Good day, everyone. So today I'm going to present Chapter 6, Module 3, the preparation for the revolutionary struggle. So let's start with the creation of Kagalang-galangan Kataas-taasan na Katipunan ng mga Anak ng Bayan, or KKK. So it was created on July 7, 1892 at Zacaraga Street with Andres Bonifacio and his colleagues. So they also do a blood compact and sign their membership paper with their blood. Afterwards, they chose a symbolic name for themselves. So Andres Bonifacio as their leader, and under his leadership, three fundamental aims were created, which are political, moral, and civic. They also created Katipunan Code, which is used to avoid Spanish knowing their kilusan. Since they need to recruit more members, they use two systems. The first one is the triangle system, which is, for example, Andres recruit Juan and Pedro, but Juan and Pedro don't know each other. They only know Andres. And the second one is the two-tier Sanggunian structure, which is all the members can invite as much as they can. And there is also a structure of membership in Katipunan. And in every unit, they need their password and the color of hoods and masks they wore. So, the first grade is the Katipon. The password is Anak ng Bayan, and they wore black hoods. The second grade is the Kawal, and the password is Gomborza, and they wore green hood. And the last one is the third grade, which are called Bayani, and their password is Rizal, and they wore red mask. Katipunan also had their women's chapter, and two of the members were Benita Rodriguez and Gregoria de Jesus. They created the flag of KKK. So if you search the flag of KKK on the internet, you will see a lot of designs. But I chose this one because the source is reliable. If we have Andres Bonifacio as the leader of the Katipunan, we also have Emilio Jacinto, the brain of Katipunan. So he helped in organizing the Katipunan, especially in military matter. He also handled the recruitment and gathering of arms. He created the Cartilla, which contains the 13 teachings that should be followed by the members of Katipunan. Emilio Jacinto was also the editor of the Katipunan's newspaper, which is called the Kalayaan, named by Dr. Pio Valenzuela. But it was said that the written editor in the newspaper was Marcelo H. del Pilar, and it was published in Yokohama. Bonifacio sent Pio Valenzuela to Rizal to consult about the pending revolution. Unfortunately, Dr. Jose Rizal said that it's really impossible for them to start the revolution since they still lacked of arms and weapons. That's the time they started to seek help. So they first asked for help from wealthy Filipinos. Unfortunately, they just got disappointed since the wealthy Filipinos refused to help. That's the time they started to create malicious documents that says wealthy Filipinos are just a burden to the Katipunan. And then They also seek help from the Japanese. Unfortunately, Japanese they also refuse to help since they just got from a war, which is the Sino-Japanese War. So next is the discovery of the KKK. So imagine the suffering and the efforts just to avoid the Spanish to know their Kilusan. The KKK was still discovered. So it happens between two Katipuneros named Teodoro Patino and Apolinario de la Cruz. So Teodoro Patino wants to revenge Apolinario de la Cruz, so he tell Honoria about the Kilusan. Honoria is an inmate in an orphanage. So the Katipunan was revealed to Father Mariano Hill on August 19, 1896. Unluckily, proofs were discovered and turned over to Guardia Civil, and that's the time the KKK was really discovered. So the discovery of KKK leads to a grievous consequences. First, a lot of Filipino were arrested, as well as well-known Filipinos, and worst, some are executed. And Bonifacio with his troops were forced to continue the revolution, though they lack of arms and weapons. Um, in and lastly, to show how desperate they were to turn down the Spanish government, they even tore their cedulas, and that event was called the Cry of Balintawak. That's all for today. Thank you for listening.